Do you all remember when cancel culture was at its height and something as simple as wearing a MAGA hat back in 2016 could get you assaulted on the street and called a Nazi? The perception that leftist movements show more public anger and violence than right wing ones isn't about a single reason. It's the result of several societal shifts happening all at once. To understand this, we need to look at the environment that encourages this behavior, the ideas that justify it, and the systems that allow it to continue without much pushback. Before we get into it, though, if you watch the channel regularly, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And absolutely smash and destroy that like button and destroy your keyboard while you smash the like button. Just kidding, don't do that. And leave a comment and let me know what you think of the video when you're finished with it. Also, if you have Twitter, follow me on there if you'd like to, where we get a lot more base because myself and fellow patriots are not censored by YouTube. You'll be able to shoot me an at too, and I love to hear what you all have to say. Last but not least, because YouTube intros are annoying, I know, follow me on Rumble in case YouTube nukes my channel. Alright, now let's get into it. A key starting point is the modern education system, particularly at the university level. This is important because most young Americans are told to go to college right after they graduate high school, and immediately, even if it's for a degree that isn't viable for finding a job. One must also recognize that the education system actively filters out right-wing and traditionalist voices, ensuring only left-leaning educators are hired and tenured during their career. This creates a closed ideological loop where each new generation of teachers is trained exclusively by activists, who then reproduce their worldview in students, who may then become the next wave of activist educators, perpetuating the cycle indefinitely. Yuri Bezmenov talks about this in his 1984 interview, and you should definitely go watch it. Anyways, for decades, many humanities and social science departments have moved towards a specific way of seeing the world. This viewpoint frames society as a collection of power struggles between groups, where traditional structures are tools of oppression used by one group and against another. Students in these indoctrination classes are taught to analyze everything through this lens of power and victimhood. This isn't just an academic exercise either, it's a subtle form of thought training. It conditions people to see political opponents not as people with different opinions, but as defenders of an evil system. When you are taught that the system itself is a form of violence, then breaking its rules by doing stuff like property damage, shutting down public speeches, attacking random people, and assaulting police officers, to them, this will feel like a justified and necessary response, even though their framework and mental lens is the thing that is wrong in the first place. It is reframed in their heads as not a crime, but as a righteous act of resistance. This education system creates a mindset and provides the moral justification for aggressive action with the leftist. Now, next will be the news, how they reframe or use certain verbiage when describing violent acts, and lack of prosecution with the weak legal system that isn't jailing these people immediately and with harsh sentences. The way our legal and media institutions respond to violence from leftists is probably the most powerful factor encouraging them. The reaction from authority figures has changed fundamentally. In many major cities across the U.S., district attorneys who are in charge of prosecuting crimes on behalf of the government are elected with support from progressive movements, and these DAs have adopted policies of not prosecuting certain low-level crimes, at the behest of these same progressive groups, often including those committed during protests. The message this sends is incredibly clear. There will be no serious consequences for violent behavior, and it goes even further than just political activism, where we see people who have committed 10 different felonies in the past being released on bail. It is an abomination of the justice system. If you want crime to go down, hire more cops, let them do their fucking job, and prosecute crimes harshly. It's a rather simple concept that would get me heated when I did EMS because I would respond to so many calls for a gunshot victim or a stabbing victim, but I digress, and I'm sort of rambling right now. Anyways, at the same time, large segments of the media act as a cheerleading squad rather than neutral observers. They often use language that downplays violence, like that infamous meme of calling riots mostly peaceful protests, and focusing on the activists' grievances in their worldview rather than the damage that they cause. The BLM riots were the biggest and most obvious example of this. A man was using counterfeit money, a prior criminal, fought with the cops, and died because he had a lethal amount of fentanyl in his system. It's just that. But the media, combined with jailing the police officer because the local government was afraid of political backlash by insane leftists, sets a bad precedent. This combination is a powerful incentive. When you remove the fear of jail time and replace it with the promise of a sympathetic national news coverage, you are effectively rewarding the behavior. We've seen this with Luigi Mangione, as his violent behavior was then cheered on by people and the like. Say what you will about healthcare, and I have a whole video on why health insurance is a scam, but this glorification of leftist violence just creates a cycle to continue more violence. People learn that acting out, sort of like a belligerent little child, gets attention and achieves their goals without personal risk, although not in the case of Luigi Mangione specifically, and that's probably because it was a rich guy in New York City, brazenly, and with a sense of right-wing ideology becoming more normalized. But yeah, anyways, we've seen this brazenly when groups that were associated with the Biden-Harris administration before the 2020 election were providing bail money for violent rioters that were burning down innocent people's businesses who had nothing to even do with this, and stealing and shooting at people. But this is a basic lesson in incentive structures. Behavior, whether it is good or bad, is rewarded, and it will be repeated. Now, the next reason is because workplaces and other major facets of the average person's life, as well as major institutions, became complicit in this in fear of backlash. You can see how this behavior is letting lawlessness happen, and the news accepting it as okay just creates a snowball effect into the average person's life now. This is just a crucial element into complete takeover of major institutions by this ideology. It's no longer just on college campuses. This worldview now dominates the human resources departments of most major corporations through diversity, equity, and inclusion, or otherwise known as DEI initiatives. It is the default language of administration and government agencies, public schools, and nonprofit organizations, or NGOs. This creates a powerful support system. Someone who engages in aggressive and violent activism is not acting alone. They are part of a vast network that will offer them legal defense, fundraising, and support. Major corporations donate billions to these causes, which is funny because leftists are the ones who claim to be against the machine, but they are the same exact ones fighting alongside the machine, as their stupid little foot soldiers, but I digress. This institutional backing makes violent activism a safe career path. It provides money, structure, and a sense of belonging. A violent leftist feels emboldened because they know a giant machine has their back. They are not just a lone protester in this case. Next is the exaggerated mental health claims. It's about how civil discourse and running our country in an orderly fashion, which keeps people safe and prosperous, has been taken over with a fake mental health crisis. Of course, this isn't to downplay actual traumatic injuries that occur in people, but you have people who say that an opposing view is triggering them, for example. A significant cultural shift has repurposed the language of mental health into a political tool. Terms like trauma, triggering, safe spaces, and harm have been lifted from clinical therapy and applied to political and social discourse. We also have some professionals within the mental health field who say that normal childhood emotions and challenges for kids are a disorder or a disease, which often leads to premature diagnoses and prescriptions for medications that alter behavior, and is a first resort rather than a last one, which can be more damaging to a child's long-term development than a simple plan like improved structure, discipline, and playing a sport and hanging out with kids more. Of course, parents can be blamed too, and this is just a generalized concept, but I digress. Let me get back to the main point. The core of this tactic is a strategic overstatement of psychological impact. Facing an opposing viewpoint, hearing a disagreeable fact, or simply being made to feel uncomfortable is routinely classified as a traumatic event that inflicts real harm. This rhetorical move serves two immediate purposes. First, it automatically frames the person expressing an idea as an aggressor and the listener as a victim. Secondly, and more importantly, in the logic of an insane leftist, it logically justifies an aggressive response. This creates a perfect feedback loop for leftists to justify aggression. First, you define your opponent's words as an attack. Then, your physical response is no longer an offense, but it's now a defense. This mindset is deeply embedded in online culture, where call-out mobs and efforts to get people fired are common. This culture teaches young people who are being indoctrinated or already are in the leftist system that strong emotional reactions are the most valid response to disagreeing with someone, and that silencing people with violence is a noble goal. It trains people to be outraged and to act on that outrage without restraint. Next will be the lack of Christianity in the household, but that is changing slowly as Gen Z continues to grow up in age, as a lot of them, especially young men, are tired of this shit. But anyways, the decline of Christianity in community has also played a role here. In the past, groups and institutions like churches, clubs, and strong family gave people a sense of identity and purpose outside of politics. They provided meaning to their sons, daughters, nieces, and nephews and taught values like forgiveness, patience, and charity. As these institutions have weakened, not only from within but also on the familial unit, politics has rushed in to fill the void. For many leftists, political ideology has become their primary source of identity and purpose. Their political tribe is who they are. This makes every political debate feel deeply personal and existential. An attack on the flawed ideology of a leftist feels like an attack on their very soul. This intensity feels a much more visceral and aggressive form of politics. There is no longer a higher value, like faith, community, family, and country, to temper this political anger. Politics then becomes a holy war to the leftists, and in a leftist holy war, any tactic is justified. Finally, we have to look at common leftist strategies. Throughout history, groups that feel shut out of power have used disruptive tactics to get attention. The logic is simple. If the system ignores you when you play by the rules, you must break the rules to be heard. So they do this by blocking traffic, occupying buildings, and creating public disturbances. These are proven ways to force an issue into the news and onto the political agenda. These tactics work. We have seen numerous examples where prolonged and disruptive protests lead to meetings with politicians, policy changes, and funding being redirected. From a purely strategic point of view, if peaceful marches are ignored but riots get results, then riots become a rational tool. The system has taught activists is that decorum, law and order, and peaceful resolutions in a civil society, which is the correct way, are ineffective, while anger and disruption get what they want. Alright guys, let me wrap this video up with a summary. To put it succinctly now, the anger and violence you see are not a random outburst. They are the predictable outcome of a specific environment. This environment is an education that teaches people the system is evil. Institutions that reward violence with attention are afraid of backlash and a lack of consequences, alongside a culture that justifies aggression as self-defense and overly committed to calling it a mental health thing, and a strategic reality that does show that these methods work. The behavior is being actively encouraged by the way our society is currently structured. To change the behavior, you would have to change these incentives. That means consequences for violent leftist behavior, hiring more cops and letting those cops arrest them and making the DA charge them appropriately, and encouraging a culture that values debate over emotional outbursts, and bringing back Christianity, which offers a true meaning beyond just identity politics. The actions we see are simply the logical conclusion from watering a growing tree that has been carefully planted and watered for a long time. Alright guys, that's all from me today. God bless you and your families, and remember, America first and only. Jimmy Talks out.